that's IIIT organized this. IIIT is
So
the one who
I'll
organized it.
I'll share information.
Inshallah.
Okay. So
Okay,
Jazakallah.
Doctor.
Okay.
Prof, 5 o'clock. I think we
Okay,
have
mute
introduced
now.
you last time, so inshallah,
Shall we
same
start?
format. Yeah, inshallah. Fadal.
Okay. Okay. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Thank you, brother, for the organization, Shahran, for the organization of this session. By the way, I received only very few questions regarding the last sessions, which I'm going to give a quick response to them. One of them is how to evaluate such kind of integration. Well, it depends on your learning outcomes. And we have another session, maybe we'll be talking about it, the classification of educational objective from an Islamic perspective. We have proposed a new method or model of categorization. So according to the type of educational objective, you design the assessment procedure. But one of the most important method is the authentic assessment. So you assess people on the basis of what they can do and what they experience, because that is related to another question: how to evaluate akhlaq. Akhlaq is your way of life. How would you evaluate your way of life? Well, by participant observation. Is as simple as that. So observation and living with people is the only way and the best way. So authentic learning and teaching demand and require authentic assessment. But one of the brothers or sisters, they talk about the Bondok system. I have no experience. As all I know about it is just the classical traditional madrasa. But I cannot consider it as the integrated as we are talking about it today. But I have to admit that I don't know much about it. So let us now move to our topic today, is the methodology of inferring educational principles from Quran. And when I talk about Quran, I'm talking about Quran and Sunnah, because the Sunnah is the interpretation of Quran. As Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, the Prophet, about the Prophet, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ. He was a walking Quran. Quran in action. So we are talking about Quran Sunnah together as Quran now. Also, we have to start with a very basic assumption. That is, Quran and Sunnah are sent to guide and organize and conduct our life, including education, because education is just part of our life. So the guidance came, the Quran and Sunnah came to organize. So if we are conducting our education, we have to be guided. We have to have the principles, the framework from Quran and Sunnah, so that RORA model. RORA model, it means that we have to recite Quran correctly first, then we have to understand it, and then we have to make tadabbur or reflection, and we have then to apply or to act according to that. So these four, we should not forget about these four phases: recitation, understanding, reflection, and application. Now, what do we mean by inferences? Very basic definition of inferences or deduction is an intellectual process to understand the meanings of the ayat and hadith and infer the educational implication and principle from the revealed text and not from their interpretation. And I have to warn myself and you, brothers and sisters, that we cannot depend on the interpretation in our inferences, because interpretation is human understanding, but inferences go directly from the text, the Quranic text itself. So, and these inferences could be apparent or hidden, or what they call sometimes high inference, low inference. So long as the scholar is following the inferences deduction criteria and standard. And these are outlined quite clearly in two different sciences, in usul al-fiqh and usul al-tafsir, the fundamental of fiqh and jurisprudence and the fundamental of interpretation or tafsir. Now, the educationists, before they are making their own inferences, have to know first the purpose of creating mankind, why we are in this life, and also what is tawheed and the nature or fitra, ibadah, life, i'mar or construction or development, tazkiyah or purification, khilafah, vigilancy, hikmah, wisdom, knowledge, ilm, tarbiyah, education, and the relationship between all these concepts. They have to understand also the higher goals, that is maqasid al-sharia, because education is part and parcel of this maqasid. And when we discuss hifdhu al-aqli, the preservation or protection of mind, is we call it protection of intellect. Intellect is aql. So inferences is an intellectual process. Now, some of these inferences as well, standards and criteria, we have to have a firm belief that the activity of making inferences is a form of worship. So what we are doing is really making worship, so that people can appreciate and put extra effort in worshiping Allah through inferring the principles of education from Quran. Also, we have to have the sincere intention and the ikhlas, the sincerity. Quran and Sunnah are the main source of Ummah education system. In fact, the Prophet, when we talk about da'wah, da'wah is education. Da'wah is reaching out to other people, to convince them and to influence them and to transform them. And that education, what it's doing, is transforming people. So the whole Islam is a tarbiyah and guidance. How come we do the literature review from the Western literature, but we forgot? We tend to forget the inferences or looking at the main constitution in our life. Now, also, anyone who is trying or attempting to make inferences has to be competent in Arabic language, because Quran was revealed in Arabic. All other translations, they are interpretation of people, not Allah's word. We cannot claim that translation is Allah's word. Allah's word, only the Arabic one. So we have to know to go directly to the Arabic language, and based on the Arabic language sciences. Also, we have to make sure that all our inferences has no conflict. It's consistent with Arabic connotation. Also, we have to make sure that no conflict between what we infer and clear-cut evidence from Quran and Sunnah. Also, we have to know many verses have reason for revelation. It gives us or shed light on the context, and understanding the context are very helpful for making inferences. And we have to know also the different ways of recitation, because sometimes different ways of recitations give extra or different meanings. Also, we have to make sure that some of the verses are cancelled. So we have not to make the inferences for something which is not, we are not abide to implement them because they have been superseded with other verses. And also, we have to have rich experience in education, because this is our field, and this is what the area what we have to infer principle for. Also, we have to know the context, whether in the education system or the social system. Understanding the context will help us to get the principle which fit the context we are working within it. Also, we have to understand the relevant verses, also the Prophet tradition and Sahaba opinion regarding the meaning of these verses. Because by understanding the Prophet interpretation and the Sahaba also, that will shed light to understand the verses better. As I said earlier, Islamic methodology for arriving at Islamic ruling, that usul al-fiqh, particularly there is a chapter dedicated for the deductional inferences methodology, and usul al-tafsir, the methodology of understanding the meaning of Quran before embarking on the process of making inferences. Also, we have to understand the history of Muslim scholars who discussed educational issues across history from the time of the Prophet until today. There are a lot of literature related to the education and Muslim education through history. So we have to know also that kind of literature. Also, we have to select at least some of the tafsir books which are authentic from Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and also make use of the different tafsir because they have different emphasis. Some tafsir focus on the linguistic things, some on fiqh issue, some on legal issue, some on educational issue, and so on. So we have to diversify the reading of our tafsir so that we can manage to understand better and to have a more comprehensive understanding of the verses. Also, we have to know what is the aim of this life and the nature of our fitrah of human beings, and also the place and time, because our inferences might be affected by the time and the place or the context we are having. Now, then once the educational are formulated, we have to review and validate our inferences. And when we review and validate our references, we have to go to scholars of different disciplines. Arabic language, it is important because Quran revealed in Arabic, tafsir specialists, educationalists, and competent practitioners who have also background of Islamic education theory and practice. And once we had the feedback from validators and reviewers, we have to improve the comments on the basis of the comments of validators and reviewers. Then immediately after that, we have, because what we got is a man effort, human beings effort. It's not holy principles. We cannot claim that what we inferred is very objective, but it is more likely to be objective. But we cannot judge it is objective. So what we have to do, it's the kind of a hypothesis. We have to put them into action and try to investigate and see the impact of these, the application of these or implementation of these principles in the process of teaching and learning, whether it is effective or not. Once we disseminate and investigate, then we can improve, either to accept it or reject it or modify it and so on. So that's again the steps and process of things. But let me now, before we give an example of one ayah, how to make the inferences as an application of what we are saying, we might be, as I said, wrong or right. But our judgment should be based on investigating the impact of this principle and its application in our education context. So practitioners should help us in order to develop, say, curriculum, teaching strategies, assessment strategies, learning outcomes, and so on. See the impact of this in the real life. Now, let us talk about some of the process. First, there are a lot of ayah. We can deduce educational principle. That's my own claim. We can deduce educational principle from every ayah in the Quran. I have done that from all the different types of ayah in the Quran. But at least there are clear ayah which you can deduce, particularly for beginners. So you can decide what are, or identify what are the verses which you can make inferences from. And also try to read the tafsir, then you might get some hints from interpreters that this is related to education process. And many, particularly recent interpreters of tafsir nowadays, they started to draw our attention to certain hints regarding some of the verses which is relevant to the educational context. Now, once you identify, you have to select authentic tafsir. Authentic tafsir, which is commonly used among the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, so that because there are false interpretation of tafsir for different sects, so we have to avoid this. And also, we might need to use Arabic language dictionary to know the meaning of every word in the Quran in its traditional sense, classical sense, because the meaning of words might change from, say, from the time of the Prophet until today. That's why after people mixed and many Muslims from non-Arabs came, they need to interpret the true meaning of the Arabic text. So we have to go and read these kind of things and to know the root of the words and the meaning, essential meaning and connotation of words. And also you have to read the verses before, the verses after, so that you see the connection between the context of the ayat you are reading. Then also you have to read the reason of revelation or reasons of revelation. And I'm sure from understanding the reasons, you will have a better understanding of the context. And that will help you in making inferences. Also, there are some verses that they say is cancelled. You have to avoid making inferences from them. Try to understand the verses from the different sciences of Arabic, like balagha, rhetoric, grammar, syntax, morphology, and so on. So there are certain sciences of Arabic language. If you know them, that will give you a better in-depth inferences, because you are having the tools of making inferences. Also, as I said, recitation, different recitation might give you extra understanding. Now you can begin. Once you are fulfilling such kind of standards and criteria, you can start making the inferences in relation to different components. When we talk about education system, we talk about the input, we are talking about the processes, and we talk about the output. So, like, you can see if there is a relevant principle related to teaching, learning, the teacher, the student, the curriculum, the evaluation, the resources, management, and so on. whatever related to education, you can infer. Your inferences might be related to input, process, or output element of education system. Now, you have to write down all these inferences, and you have to provide them to reviewers to review and validate your inferences, whether they are valid or not. And they have to be across the board from the different disciplines, as I said, different Arabic language specialists, tafsir specialists, usul al-fiqh specialists, Muslim educationalists, Muslim educational competent practitioners, and so on. The more you ask who are knowledgeable and have the experience, and also they are not very traditional. They have to live their own time. They can relate the text to context. They are contemporary in their own thinking. Otherwise, you cannot learn from them. So it is preferable that all of them have practical educational experience, whether they are in usul al-fiqh or Arabic language. They have some sort of relation to the context of education. Having got the reviewers' comments, then you can go back and improve your inferences based on what you learned. And then what you have arrived at as a kind of ijtihad, which again could be right or wrong. Now, in collaboration with competent practitioners, you can design research. And research is very, very important in our inferences, because we can investigate the impact or the effect of what we inferred on real life education practices in our schools or universities. Then the result could accept, reject, or modify our understanding. Now, let me now give you an example. Because we have a very short time, we are going to focus only on one ayah and see how can we make inferences. First, I would argue that the best way of making inferences today is to have a team rather than one person, because we cannot bring somebody who knows all the different disciplines. So the best way is to bring people from different disciplines and conduct interdisciplinary research of making inferences. So we can have somebody who has specialist in usul al-fiqh, one in Arabic language, one educationist, one in tafsir, and so on, but they have experience in education. That will help us to make our work and our inferences more relevant to reality. So it will be more objective, and the outcome could be again be reviewed and validated as well, and that will give it a credibility. So I would advise our brothers and sisters to form groups of specialists so they can read the Quran. They should not stop reading the Quran for the sake of developing our education system. But as I said, because there is a difficulty in encompassing all the different disciplines, let us form a team and work together. And that is the trend today. And once we review and validate the team inferences, then again, we can have a better, improved inferences on educational implications or principle. Now let me take with you a few minutes just to discuss how to make inferences from one ayah. Is the first ayah, or one of the ayah, which Musa alayhi salam asked Al-Khadr. It's number 66. And this ayah said, let us read it together. Moses said to him, that is to Al-Khadr, the righteous man, may I follow you on the condition, look, the student is putting condition, that you teach me from what you have been taught of sound judgment. هل أتبعك على أن تعلمني مما علمت رشدا. Now we are going to ponder on this. So we recite and understand. Understand hal is a question. Okay? Me, I follow you. Hal attabi'uka, follow you. And it is self-explanatory. Ala an tu'allimani. So you teach me. Mimma ullimta, from what you have been taught, that is by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mimma ullimta rushda, that it, so that I can be guided. Or sound judgment he called it, but yes, rushda is something to be guided. So now the student is asking politely the teacher to allow him to follow and to learn from him, so long as that's his own condition, that he can learn from what Allah has given him, so that he can guide his life according to this new knowledge he has learned. That's the basic understanding of the ayah, or the understanding of ayah. Now, let us ponder now, reflect. First, the student can raise question to the teacher with respect. Now, this is a principle. This is a conclusion. This is an inference that student can, in fact, if we look at Islam, Islam encourages the student to ask. In fact, the opening for seeking knowledge is questions. So questioning is very important, and we have to encourage students to question, that is to raise questions, but at the same time respect. Now respect, you are talking about the manners of the student towards his teacher. The learner has to avoid arrogance and show humility and humbleness. From the word may I follow you. This is the highest humility and humbleness. And that means that we have to cultivate in our student humility, humbleness, respect, that all akhlaq. That's why in Islam, akhlaq is very important dimension in the educational system. We don't focus more on akhlaq. And when we say akhlaq, it's the way of life, the way we interact with each other, the way we interact, it's not knowledge. Because even if some schools, Muslim schools, they are teaching akhlaq, they teach knowledge. They don't teach way of life. They don't teach what Aisha said about the Prophet. He is a Quran in action. He's a war. Instruction. He's ready. He had shown him respect, not only respect, not only motivation, not only, but he was ready as well to follow the instructions of the teacher and to accept his condition. The student has put one condition, that is, he needs knowledge which would guide him in life. But also the teacher has the right to put his own condition, as we could see. Both the learner and the teacher have to have a firm belief that the source of knowledge is Allah. Mimma ullimta, from what you have been taught. So the source of knowledge, and this is one of the principles in Islam, is knowledge is Allah, is the all-knowing. And our little knowledge we have is coming through His mercy and blessing. Learning includes all type of knowledge. Mimma ullimt. Ullimt is generic name. Nakira. Mimma ullimt could be revealed knowledge, it could be social science, in natural science that we can see in the story, it includes everything. So here we learn from this verse that knowledge is encompassing all the different types of knowledge, so long as it helps man to live happily in this life and to succeed in the life to come. The learner can select the teacher, but he has to ensure that he is competent. So the student, or maybe in case of the children, the parents, have to select the teacher whom they feel that they are competent and they can offer effective, useful, beneficial knowledge. Also, the ayah talked about adult education is encouraged even for learned. Now he's a prophet and he's a learner. He's a learned person, but at the same time, he is a new learner. He continued learning according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the revelation, reason of revelation. We know that Allah told him to go so that to teach him humility and respect and so on. So the reason for revelation help us to make inferences as well. The learner can decide his learning outcome. Mimma ulim rushda. His learning outcome is to be guided. So he decided what he wants. So the student knows about the learning outcome and the objective of his learning. Objective have to be clear for both the learner and the teacher, and they have to negotiate them. So in this ayah, there was a negotiation, an interaction between the student and the teacher to arrive at a conclusion which would specify the roles and responsibilities of both teacher and the student. Objective have to be beneficial for learner's life. Well, that's the most important thing, because that was the basic condition for the student, is to be guided and to have sound judgment for his learning. So benefit for knowledge is very important principle. So one of the learning outcomes of our education is how to make knowledge we are learning beneficial to the student and the people around him in life. Also, we learn from this verse, the learner and the teacher can negotiate the roles and conditions for teaching and learning. Also, we learn individual learning is one of the modes of learning, because one-to-one now. There are many cases, in other cases, where the Prophet teach one to a group of Sahaba. But in this case, we learn that one-to-one, individual learning. Also, there is no limit for the knowledge. The learner can learn so long as it is beneficial for the learner's life. So he can learn whatever knowledge, so long as the main criterion is to benefit from knowledge. Learning needs engagement of both the teacher and the learner. Another principle is engagement. Positive, effective interaction between the teacher and student. And we can see that was an interaction, very effective interaction between Musa and Al-Khadr. And in this ayah, we can see the kind of engagement. Also, teaching and learning can take place in real life. And real life issues are the curriculum themes and topics. As I said, in this now, the Al-Khadr and Musa met not in a classroom, in a room of four walls, but they met in the real life. So authentic learning is very effective type of learning. I'm not saying that we should do away with classes, but what I'm saying is authentic learning is very important and effective way of learning. Effective learning needs companionship. Sohba. I cannot use mentoring or coaching for in business, but companionship maybe, or sohba is the best word, because the student has to accompany the teacher in order to learn not only knowledge, but as I said, akhlaq. Because if the teacher is a Quran in action, a good example, then student can emulate and imitate the teacher. We are not focusing on knowledge in Muslim education. We are focusing on holistic education, personality development, not just knowledge. I would say thank you for listening. This is a very quick. I tried to stick to the time Brother Shahran gave me, and I hope that should be useful and beneficial. And if there is any particular question, you are most welcome. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu warahmatullah. Thank you so much, Prof. Okay, we'll have Brother Al Hassan Lawal. Yeah, I will unmute you. Okay. Al Hassan, about you on your video.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu wa rahmatullah.
Okay. Brother Hassan from please unmute yourself.
Hello?
Okay, assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yeah, very
Yes,
clear.
yes.
MashaAllah. I say thank you so much Prof, for the lecture. And my only question is, while summarizing the preference, you mentioned that a student, how can a student choose the teacher? Was there any criteria for choosing a teacher?
Criteria for? Hello?
The criteria, was there any criteria of teaching, of choosing teacher? Hello?
Yes, yeah. Prof, criteria for teaching, for choosing teacher instead of.
For choosing teacher. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for
choosing teacher.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Well, to
Yeah.
me, that will require the Muslim Ummah to establish good schools, exemplary schools. If you are not happy with the teacher or the schools you are sending your children to or university to, you have to work together to establish good schools. And the most important thing in a Muslim university or Muslim school are the Islamic environment, the ethos, the climate inside, plus the teachers, if they are committed to the mission and objective of Islam. So the criteria is the commitment of both the management and the teachers to Islam, and also the competency in the curriculum they are teaching. So there is competency plus commitment in their own life. These two criteria are the most important one.
Yeah. Brother Yusuf, do you want to ask question?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much for. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Yeah, thank you so much for. My question here is that in a situation whereby you have to go to class to teach your students and you're not that cumbersome with the topic you have to give lecture on, so what will you suggest? Do you, how would that be best for you? Are you supposed to go and deliver the lecture on that situation that you're not cumbersome with the topic itself, or you are to come back and revisit the topic yourself and gets, to become more knowledgeable of dice on it and later go to the class and give lecture? What will be best for you?
The best for me, for the student to go, as I said, are you teaching at the university or school?
University, for example.
Well, I think to me, university is easier. It's less difficult
Okay.
and less yes, it's less complex, because people are mature. You can negotiate and you can talk to them logically. So the most important thing, as I said, the management of the university should adhere to the mission we are trying to abide by. Second, we have to work with the student, and we have to be leading example for the teacher, for the students. And you yourself, you can remember during your school time who is the best teacher, which influenced you, and you love most, and you love even the subject most, and you try to imitate most. So it refers to you personally as a lecturer, whether the student are trusting you, loving you, so that they can take and buy in all the ideas you are giving them. So, and you have to evaluate yourself. I mean, I'll just give you an example myself. After I finished my PhD in the UK, I went back home and I started teaching at the postgraduate level, our master degree. After 1 month of my teaching, I distribute a piece of paper for all the students. They were mature, and I told them, can you evaluate me? Advise me what to do better. And I managed to get a lot of advice from my students. And it was a very good comment. I think without being evaluating myself through them, their eyes, how they perceive me, not how I perceive them. The most important thing, how they perceive me. And by looking at their perception, I can change and modify and improve. And it is a continuous process. Improvement of teaching, learning, and everything, strategies and so on. It's a continuous. It never stops. We are still, until today, we are learning.
Okay, we go to Brother Yusuf Sharif and then Brother Musta'in. Okay, Brother Yusuf Sharif.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Prof, thank you for the wonderful lecture you've delivered. My questions, I have two questions, okay? And the first question goes thus. Sorry, how do we reconcile between the Islamic education and Western education to ensure a rewardable exercise? That is one. The second question is that the other time you were talking about the things that are expected of a learner, particularly towards his teacher. You did mention the fact that respect, there is need for a learner to accord his teacher with respect. We all know that it is this is good, but in a situation whereby lecturers in some environment of more they believe in this respect such that they will make sure that they don't recognize the stuff in the student, and then they will always want the student to give them the respect to the extent that the student will not even be able to recognize what is in him or herself again. How do we treat that situation? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your questions. It seems that we are shifting from the inferences into the real world questions. Okay, no problem. First, how we reconcile Islamic and Western education? I don't see to reconcile both. I think we have to know the framework from our side, from the Islamic perspective. Revealed knowledge should tell us what is the framework for everything. Now the details, unfortunately, the Muslim researchers did not dwell too much on the details of the reality of today, here and now. But the Western people, they've done a lot. They do thousands and thousands and hundreds and millions of research in this area. So we have the framework and we have a lot of practical research. We have to learn from the practical research, but we have to be eclectic and selective, whatever help us. I mean, for instance, in the West, they are talking mostly about thinking, mainly. And you can see even in the educational objective, they talk cognitive thinking, mostly. But in our tradition, we believe that we want to develop human beings. That's number one. Thinking is just part of it. It is very important part, but not everything. Now, when we go to research, we have to do a lot of research in other aspects rather than only thinking. So I would say trying to integrate better than to reconcile reconcile. Second thing regarding the other one, whether the kind of akhlaq which should organize the kind of relationship between the student and the teachers.
Prof, we are losing your voice.
Because they are the one who implement the educational system. So we cannot blame the students. To me, we should not start from blaming the student. We have to start from blaming ourselves. What are the competencies of a Muslim lecturer or a Muslim school? And to what extent he's committed to these competencies? Whether spiritual, social, academic, what have you. If we manage to develop the personality of the educator, then we can ensure developing the personality of learners. So let us, I think, focus more in the coming days and years on the development of the educator. And what is the role of educator? It's not just knowledge transmitter. He is a reformer. He is a socializing agent. He's a transformation agent. With this kind of mission, we can do better and we can reform our society through reforming education system. Wallahu a'lam.
I tried to get this Mariam's iPhone. Try to unmute. Get it. Okay, Sister Mariam, or just the phone? Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Salam.
Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation, Prof. My question here is, we have a school here in Nigeria. It's a secondary school and it's Islamic based, but owing to what you said with regards to the learning objectives of the school, it has to be an environment which supports Islamic rulings and all that. But we have teachers that are non-Muslims in some disciplines like mathematics, physics, and all. We weren't able to get teachers that are Muslims. Then a learner has to have a certain respect for teachers, and some of the students seeing the teachers being non-Muslims, and while we are trying to show them the importance of Islamic education in the curriculum, there is this fear that they will not respect those